Welcome back to the second part of this tutorial series where we're taking Stable Diffusion images and Deforum animations and bringing them into Unity VR with the help of Touchdesigner. Here we are in Touchdesigner and we are looking at what we built last time, which are 6 movie file ends representing each of the 6 faces of the cube that we constructed on the Unity side, which serves as our skybox. So here we are in the middle of the skybox. If I pull out, you can see this is exactly what we put together last time. And just as a quick reminder, the way we were able to do that was to use a plugin called Spout, which allowed us to capture an image stream from Touchdesigner and store that image stream locally in Unity as a render texture. Each render texture was applied to a material, and each material was applied to each of the sides of the cube from the quads that we have over here. I have a link in the description for this video to my GitHub repo, which will contain a starter Unity project that is already set up with this Spout plugin, as well as all the settings required for VR. So what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on these 3 faces of our skybox. In terms of what we'll see on the Unity side, be generally the field of view of what the headset will see. So that would be these 3 faces here. Eventually, we'll work on the bottom and the top, but to begin with, this will be a good proof of concept for the way this works. So over in Touchdesigner, the plan is to start with one of the faces of the cube. In this case, we're going to start with the cube left face, and we're going to composite a deform animation on top of this image. Eventually, we will create a deform animation in real time from Unity inside of VR that will automatically composite over the image once we've set this up. But for today, I'd like to just focus on the process of how to do the compositing on the Touchdesigner side and show how seamlessly it transfers over to the Unity side to create the experience in the 360 environment. I've gone ahead and created a deform animation previously, so it's ready for us to use here in this tutorial. Before we bring that in, let's set a couple things up here so we can do our composite. So as I said, we're focusing on this part of the cube. And just as a convenience, I'm going to create something called a null by right-clicking, hitting Add Operator, typing in null so I can find it, and putting it down here in the grid. And then I'm going to connect the out from the movie file in, which is the left face, to the in of the null. And I'm going to rename this null MFI left. Now, what I'm about to do here, I've already done previously and spent the time tweaking all the parameters, and I have it over here ready to go. But without giving the show away, we're going to build this piece by piece, and I will be referring to this previously built network for all the parameters, using each one as a bit of a cheat sheet so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So this null represents this image. We want to place a deform animation on top of this image. And in order to do that, we need to be able to pull in the animation. So we're going to create another movie file in, and I'm going to right click, hit parameters, click on this plus icon, find the location of my animation that I created previously, select the first frame, make sure that that first frame is not showing here in file so that it selects the entire folder. We are selecting the entire folder, the whole sequence of PNGs, which is essentially our animation. I'm going to put this under here because these will be the 2 pieces of our composite. Now, if I push play now, you will see some animation take place, but it's not quite right. And in order to get this working smoothly, I need to set a couple parameters differently. And as I said before, I went ahead and experimented with different settings to find the right settings for this project. Also, just a quick aside, some of the images in this project may be leaning towards the not safe for work side, so keep that in mind as we go forward. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to grab the movie file in that I set up previously. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it right here. I'm going to right-click and hit parameters, and then right-click and hit parameters on the one we just created together, and make sure our parameters are the same. So you can feel free to change these parameters any way you like, but I would suggest sticking with the parameters that I've set up for this tutorial. And then once you see how it works, you can go ahead and experiment with other settings. First of all, we're going to change speed to 0.123. This is the actual speed of the animation, how quickly it plays. Next, we're going to go down to loop crossfade, set that to 0.393. Loop crossfade allows us to gracefully blend the first and last frame of the animation so that it becomes a seamless loop, and it's very difficult to tell where it starts and stops. I found that this is a good setting for this particular animation. Okay, we're going to the next tab, which is image, and here we're going to set interpolate frames to on, and I do believe this makes it a bit smoother in terms of the transition from frame to frame. If that's not correct, feel free to correct me in the comments below. We're going to go to the trim tab now, and here we're going to set override sample rate to on. We're not going to change the sample rate for now, but we'll get back to this later in the tutorial. I'm going to now go to the tune tab, and in the tune tab we're going to change keep frame to best for playback, and I think this is going to help us with optimizing the playback of the animation. Again, if this is not correct, please do let me know if that's the case in the comments below. And lastly, we're going to go to our common setting. And here in the common setting, everything is good. We don't need to make any changes. We are grabbing the resolution from the input, and the input is a 512 by 512 image. That's how this was rendered out in Deforum. So by setting it to use input, that's the resolution we'll have as an output resolution. I'm going to close this out, close that out. We're now done with this. We can delete it, and our movie file in is now set up properly. So let's hit play and see what that looks like. And as you can see, we have a nice smooth transition, and it is very difficult, if not impossible, to figure out where the animation starts and stops, which is the whole point. So this was supposed to be a full mermaid body, but as I went and played around with the deform settings, I came up with this portrait of the face, which I kind of liked for the purposes of this video, so I just stuck with that. Okay, so moving right along, we have our deform animation set up nicely, and we have our background. Now, in order to composite our deform animation on top of the background, we want to set up our deform animation so that we can remove some of the background pixels that will make it blend more seamlessly. So if you look here in the back, you can see that if we were to mask out or cut around the face, ideally we'd want this section of the image to be more transparent so it would blend more nicely on the background. In order to do that, we can mask this out by using the depth map, which is provided to us by Deforum for free when you run the animation. So the way I'm going to get that is I'm going to copy this movie file in. I'm going to rename it to Deforum depth. I'm going to right click, hit parameters, make sure I'm on the play tab, hit the plus button, and go into the depth folder that contains the depth map for this deform animation. So we're going to open this up again and make sure we take out the first frame. So we reference the whole folder that way. And let's just make sure that they're in alignment. They should be, because these movie files have all the same parameters since I duplicated it. So we're in good shape. Okay, so to spare you from having to fiddle with just the right settings for these parameters, I'm going to go back to what I had created previously. And I'm going to actually grab these two nodes here, which are all set up and ready to go for us. And I'm going to paste them over to the side. Let's get rid of this connector because we don't need that anymore. Okay, so the first node is a levels node. And what we want to do is we want to take our depth map and we want to feed it in to our levels node. I'm going to hold off on this other node just for a second, leave it off to the side. So what we're doing here in this levels node is we are inverting the image so that white is black and black is white. And the reason we have to do that is because we're going to be using this depth map as a mask. And for the purposes of masking, white is opaque and black is transparent. So we want our image to obviously show the face, but mask out the background. So the face should be white, the background should be black. And we need to invert this in order to make that happen. You see this face is white, background is blackish. There's some other settings in here that I also affected. So you can see invert is up at around 0.967. It comes in like this, but after I made my adjustments, it changes to this. And then I made some changes to the black level, the brightness, gamma, contrast, and so on. I'm not going to go through all that now. You can play with this as you like, but these are the settings that work well for the purposes of creating this mask. So after we have inverted it and made some adjustments with the levels node, we then feed it into this blur node, which softens the edges a bit. And I find this makes it look nicer in the final composite. So we're going to pull this back. And now we're ready to actually create the mat. I'm going to pull this up because we actually do need one more component. I'm going to hit add operator, mat, grab a mat node, open it up, feed in the image that we want to mask, feed in our mat, which is the bottom, and then we're going to combine this with another image so that when this mat affects the original image, it will remove this part, make it transparent, and it will preserve this part and keep it as opaque. But when we blend this, we want to blend it with something that's transparent so that when this part is removed, we see through to the bottom, and the bottom is going to be transparent. So I'm going to create another node. In this case, I'm just going to make a rectangle. And we don't really care about the dimensions. We just want this whole image to be transparent. So I'm going to go into parameters, and I'm going to bring the alpha all the way down to 0. That's just going to give us a nice transparent image here. So no pixel data. We're going to feed that in. And we can see now, once we select parameters and set this to luminance, not alpha, but luminance, because this is taking white and black values. And based on the white and black values, it's setting what gets cut out. So we can see now, if I hit play, that it's doing a fairly good job. It's not perfect, but it's doing a fairly good job of removing some of that background. Now we have to do a couple more passes on this to make it better, but this is how we're going to start. And I'm going to now pull this back, and we're going to have to feed this now into another mat. So we're going to go mat, similar to how we handled it earlier. We're going to now feed this image into the top. We're going to use our same transparent for the image that we're going to mix with. And now our mat is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to use the depth map. We're going to actually just use a circle. So we're going to add an operator in, circle, and we're going to open that up so you can see it. And we're going to use this circle as our mask or our mat. And you can see it cuts out a lot of this background here that we don't want to see. But the edge is very harsh, so we need to modify the circle so it looks smoother. And again, without having to fiddle, I'm going to go and take what I already did back here. And I'm going to copy these two. And I'm going to pull them out. And I'm going to paste them over here. And we're going to do the same thing. So here's the circle. We're going to use the circle I created before. And we're going to feed this into here instead. Get rid of this circle. And you can see if I just use the circle as is, the edge is still, it's softer, but it's a little too harsh. So we want to like blend it a little bit more, and that's the reason for this other blur. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to feed this blur into this mask slot. Let's clean this up a bit here, pull this back. And let's just move this stuff around so it makes more sense. Okay, so now you can see we have a bit even softer and I think better blended edge. But the problem is that we have some overflow here because we blurred it out so much. It's now running over to the edge of the image. And if we left this like this, we would see a seam in our skybox, and we can't have that. It will break the illusion. So we need to add yet another mat to make it a little bit more refined, to completely eliminate anything on the edges. We don't want anything on the edges at all. It needs to be completely transparent. So one more layer of mat will do the trick. Now, again, I'm not an expert in Touchdesigner. If this were After Effects, it'd be a different story. But I'm doing the best I can as far as the knowledge I have with Touchdesigner. So if anybody has more knowledge about masking in Touchdesigner and maybe going about this a better way, please do share that in the comments below. Another idea I had was just creating a custom mat in Photoshop and bringing it in. That probably would work well too. But I wanted to just sort of stick with the nodes in Touchdesigner for this tutorial. Okay, so we're now going to create another mat. We're going to right click, mat. And, same drill. We're going to pull this into the top. We're going to use the same transparency for the middle. And we need another mask. So again, I'm going to go back over to what I had created earlier. I'm going to grab this node here, copy it, pull it back, paste, and use that. Just another circle. As you can see, just a circle with different parameters set for the softness, which is basically all we're doing is changing the softness parameter. And you can see as we feed that in, now we have no pixel data on the edges, which is exactly what we want. So when we blend this back in again, we will have no overflow hitting anywhere close to the edge of the actual underlying image. Okay, so now we're ready to blend this animation that's been matted into our underlying image for the left face of the skybox. So I'm going to just bring this up a little bit so you can see it. And what we need to do now is we need to use a composite node. And a composite node is going to allow us to place one image over the top of the other and blend them. Just like in Photoshop, you have different layers. So you can think of these as different layers, or in After Effects. So we're going to feed in our deform animation, and we're going to feed in our background face of the cube. And we're going to set the parameters so that our composite operation is not multiply, but instead a top. And you can see when we do that, we have a nice blend going on. And it doesn't look bad, but it's a little too big. So we're going to have to bring this down. So we're going to hit parameters again, go into transform, very handy, it's right here. And we're going to modify these parameters so that it's positioned the way we want it to be. And essentially, it would be best if we can kind of put it directly in the center of the face of this cube so that when we're looking at it in VR, it should be right in our eye line and present very nicely in the 360 environment. So we're going to scale this down to about 0.35, 0.35. And I'm going to translate up in the Y about that much. Leave it in the X. I think it's just so, maybe a little bit more in the Y. And that should be about right. We're going to test this out now. So in order to do that, as you recall, we were taking our left and we were sending it out to our spout here. So now what we want to do is we want to pull this up here. We're going to break the original connection and we're going to pull this into our spout node. And now this is our new left node, which should automatically be updated on the Unity side. Okay, so here we are inside of the MetaQuest headset, inside of the Unity project, looking at the 360 environment of the underwater scene and the deform animation coming across from Touchdesigner, blended in very nicely into our background. And we will eventually be moving towards placing more animations in this environment. We will be animating things like the vegetation and some sea life like octopi and jellyfish, and ultimately try to bring the entire environment alive by using Deforum in real time, maybe another mermaid or two. But I think this is a good proof of concept for how we can nicely blend in a deform animation via Touchdesigner into a Unity project and look at it in an Oculus Quest headset. So next time we'll start getting into the real-time animation. We'll kick off the creation of a deform animation inside the Unity environment, and we'll see the animation be created before our eyes inside of the environment. So I hope this was a useful tutorial. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do place any comments you have in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified when the next part of this tutorial series is available. And we'll see you next time. Be sure to check the description down below for links to my GitHub repo, where I will provide you with this Unity project that will contain all of the settings for VR and the Spout plugin that will enable connectivity to Touchdesigner. I will also provide you with the Touchdesigner project that will have the setup that we showed in this tutorial, as well as the animation that you're seeing here and the 360 environment that we set up in Unity. So you'll have all of the materials and project files to be able to do this and set this up on your own. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when the next part of this tutorial becomes available.